So, Binance was recently hacked. According to the exchange, there was one affected transaction wherein hackers were able to withdraw 7,000 bitcoins, worth about $41 million. In a letter on their website, CEO CZ states that the bitcoins were withdrawn from their hot wallets, which contain only about 2% of the exchange's total Bitcoin holdings. He later hosted an Ask Me Anything live session to address various questions from the community regarding the hack. Now, answering questions on whether Binance would consider rolling back the Bitcoin network transactions, which would require consensus for the miners to gather 51% of the network's total hashing power, he said, "To be honest, we can actually do this probably within the next few days, but there's some concerns that if we do a rollback on the Bitcoin network at that scale, it may have some negative consequences in terms of destroying the credibility for Bitcoin." Okay, so this is where the news ends and where my opinion begins. There's a lot to unpack here, but for the sake of brevity, here's my take. This is one of the most delusional and self-centered things I've ever heard. Let's ignore for the time being the game theory and possibility of trying to essentially bribe the Bitcoin network to 51% attack itself. As you might know, the security model for Bitcoin rests upon the economic incentives which prevent miners from working on large reorganizations. Those economic incentives go away when there's the possibility of a larger payout than the miner's normal income. This is a fully known property and was discussed in the original Bitcoin white paper. Now, the idea won't work unless miners collude to actively 51% attack the Bitcoin system. And also keep in mind that this is a theoretical game theory situation. But what's interesting to me is that the attacker doesn't need an expensive, disruptive reorganization that calls into question the value of Bitcoin. They simply need to pay some high fee transactions to miners to encourage them to keep mining the existing chain, something they'll do anyways. In this case, Binance could promise to pay the miners, say a couple BTC per block, for however many blocks it takes to reorg out of the theft transactions and replace them with a spend aggregating the funds into a cold storage. As long as this is less than a few thousand blocks, it makes economic sense for everyone involved simply because of the enormous size of the theft. And yet, even if this was feasibly possible to reorg or roll back, the implications are antithetical to everything that Bitcoin stands for. Rollbacks and mulligans are the tools of centralization. Finality is the realm of the decentralized. The last thing we want is for the public to see that Bitcoin is similar to systems like Alipay and PayPal, where transactions can be reversed. Responsibility for securing funds from attack rests in the hands of the exchanges holding them, not the miners. Stolen assets are stolen, and the tool to get them back, if any, is traditional law enforcement. I'm sorry, but these coins are gone. What's more, the circumstances regarding the hack are suspect at best. I'm calling into question the notion that hackers somehow got access to a ton of individual accounts' two-factor authentication codes. User identities being compromised makes this worse than just some money heist. And it simply makes me question the logic of the attacker here. 7,000 BTC from one of the highest volume exchanges is simply going to be very hard, if not impossible, to wash. Maybe the thieves are patient, but where realistically are they going to sell the funds? Now, of course, this is why I've been critical of centralized exchanges and why I'll continue to be. Your funds are not Seifu because they're not your funds. And yes, centralized exchange hacks happen all the time. What makes me livid in this case is the casual suggestion that decentralization can be flipped on and off like a light switch, that somehow 40 million being stolen predicates the notion that we should just abandon the last 10 years and turn Bitcoin into Ethereum or Bitcoin Cash. If it were so easy, we should have just rolled back Mt. Gox or Bitfinex. But we didn't. We chose the harder path because progress requires sacrifice and struggle. And this is because we believe the decentralized future will be worth it. Look, CZ either doesn't know what he's talking about, or he's narcissistic enough not to care about what Bitcoin is and what it represents simply by bringing the idea up and commenting on it. And I don't care either way. I made my opinions on Binance pretty clear last week regarding their shift towards centralization. To me, they're pretty much a lost cause and not worth supporting. What I do care about is the future of this space. and the future of decentralization. Bitcoin still has a very large role to play in that, despite many people writing it off. Of course, Bitcoin is not the only thing pushing this space forward, but I will actively defend Bitcoin against those who would act against it. I think this is as good a time as any to focus on efforts to strengthen the network against a single hostile actor, or a mining cartel, etc. For example, we know that ASIC centralization in proof-of-work consensus is a weakness. I also feel that mining pools are one of those zero-day vulnerabilities that exist now for the Bitcoin network, and I'm actively looking into efforts like Better Hash. Mining pools encourage miners to sit back and be NPCs basically, whereas Better Hash encourages individual miners to run nodes and create block templates, and then share the reward using a pool. What's different versus how pools are done now is that miners are responsible for consensus and there's thousands of them. Therefore, it's impossible to approach a small number of people that represent a majority of the total network hash power. Look, I'm sure this whole story will blow over by next week and everyone will forget what happened and what CZ said, and that's fine. Had this been just another hack, I would have crossed my arms, expressed my displeasure, and reminded people to get their funds off exchanges. But ultimately, it would have hardly piqued my interest. Instead, and why I made this video, was that I saw a casual, even if ignorant, existential threat to the Bitcoin network. And that's something I won't tolerate. This space is too important to be bent to the will of one person. We simply shouldn't let this narrative fly that Bitcoin can be rolled back. That's dangerous misinformation, and I'm glad to see the community call out CZ for a serious red flag. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you get as fired up about this topic as I do? And finally, what do you think is the future of exchanges like Binance? Let's discuss in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.